access to information is pertinent to them for purposes of having a collective decision making. For development to be sustainable, it has to be owned by us. You can't evict a whole village away for you to put up development projects. For whom are they put up for? That's the question, and that will take me to Ms. Baitomasa Jennifer from the Albertine region to share with us some of the experiences with all the development projects going on from the central processing facility, from the oil roads construction, from the ECOP, the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, and the other business entities in the region. Jennifer, you're welcome.
Good afternoon to all the viewers. I'm Jennifer Baitamasa. I do work with Navigators of Development Association. We are based in Hoima, where we have extractive sector taking place. We go up to Bulisa, where we have the Tilenga project. We go to Hoima. In Bulisa, we have Tilenga, we have the CPF. We also come to Hoima, we have Kingfisher, we have the ECOP, we have road construction, the oil critical roads. We have other developments like sugarcane growing, where we have the factories. When we talk about the FPIC in the region, it takes us to an understanding where the communities, the host communities, the PAPs, the beneficiaries, are able to freely exercise and participate and get information that is best for them to make final decisions, to be part of decision making. And this helps them to prepare for their attitudes and in acceptance of their project. This goes hand in hand with sharing information, preparing the PAPs, that is holding community level engagements, ranging from the time that the project is being initiated up to the time of compensation. That is all, it cuts across to all the projects that I've talked about. And we shall agree that it has been there, but it has not been thoroughly exhausted. That we are seeing communities lacking enough information about the development projects, and at the end of the day, we find them not accepting and admitting to what had earlier been done. Take an example, like people have been valued, disclosures have been done, and now it is time to give in accounts. And now then they come up and say, we don't have enough information, we didn't look at the values, and we are not able to give in our accounts. So meaning here we are lacking the concept of free, prior, and informed consent, which we still have to give much emphasis in the region such that the projects can go on well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for speaking to what is happening in the Albertine region. For the viewers and members present here, you know that Uganda is exploring its oil, and this comes with a lot of infrastructure development. So she was giving us a picture of what is happening when it comes to sharing this information and obtaining informed consent from the project affected persons and host communities of these development projects. I'll move on to Payoliel MP Onenchan. What is the story like from the part of the country where you're operating? Is the application of the principles of free, prior, and informed consent a reality for the people where you're working?
Good afternoon, viewers and the participants. Joseph, thank you very much for that. And I always consider about two things, which is something that must be considered either by project implementers or the financiers and not even the beneficiaries. These are inform and consent itself in FPIC. But I wanted to share some of the experience in regard to one of the projects we have been monitoring closely. That is a project related to irrigation scheme, which is in West Nile in Pakwaj district. Is a wildlife irrigation scheme, is under farm enhancements and forest conservations. So these projects, the main goal is to improve the livelihood of the community around wildlife. But of course, it's been funded by African Development Bank, and this is the development financing and the institutions, but also they have their own safeguard policy on the ground, and also our country also have policy on the ground that is supposed to be followed during the implementation of the projects. But of course, the project has also a number of components. One of the components is the infrastructure development, and one of the components look at agribusiness. Another component looks into project management. But we are closely looking at the component one, which is infrastructure development. And you know, this infrastructure development comes with the Atlantic. But in Atlantic, the project is supposed to acquire land for infrastructure, that is canal, road, and other facilities that government was supposed to compensate and follow our land acquisition process and do the best. But of course, another component in land acquisition is that the landowners where the project is instituted supposed to offer their land to the projects. And of course, that land will not be offered maybe maybe it's supposed to be compensated. No. These landowners will be renting out their land to land users. But of course, the projects had, at the beginning of the project has some part of communities, and there was part of government institution, that is prison lands. But during the midterm review, the project implementers, they realized that if the projects, they make the projects to use the government institution, that is prison land, the community, most of the community will not benefit. So they identify one of the community land to be as a substitute land. And in this process, there was a problem now in informations. So where they identified the substitute land, it had already, there was a problem in information disseminations. So you get, the project implementers are saying, no, we need about 730 acres of land. And community is saying, you have requested us for 360 acres of land. So the disputes is there in informations. And that one makes that the communities lose trust in the project implementers. And what does that one mean? To say that the projects need to delay because there was a problem in information dissemination, or the government has to use force, which of course they use force. They had to go into the land, the stage where community claims they were shot, wounded, you see. There are people who have been taken to court. Community also ran to courts. They had to follow, seeking for remedies. So what does that one mean to us? Because the project intention is very good, but because the information was not properly disseminated to these communities, it affects now the project's implementations. And also it brings in a component of violating human rights, the rights of those beneficiaries. And also, again, ownership level, like when you look at that project I'm giving as an example, because this is a project for this community. Now, who is going to own it if forcefully being put there? Are we going to waste donor money? If it's a loan, are we going to waste the loan? So those are some of the things that we, to me, I look at FPICS. If it's followed, it creates an environment where the projects it creates an environment where the projects can do well, everybody will welcome it, and ownerships, participations, and even the government will enjoy and say, by the end of the day, they can document a story, say, let us go to this community, and they tell us the story. So that is a very big challenge to us as the country, as the people in this room. What is our take? So to say we need to see how best can we implement the principle, this FPIC, and also other associated law within our countries, so that by the end of the day, we enjoy the benefit of this development.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nenchan, for ably sharing the application of the principles of free, prior, and informed consent to the project funded by the African Development Bank. It's very clear that when there is no access to information, then it's a recipe for disaster. The state will get its machinery to try and force the project onto the people. But what is key is the collective decision making, where the community will own the project being established on their land. I want to quickly go to Mr. Mwebe to speak to the role of these international financial institutions, because most of the money we use as a country to fund the development projects comes from these international financial institutions, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, the European Investment Bank. In their safeguard policies, what's their take when it comes to implementation of the project on land that is owned by Ugandans? Yes, John.
Thank you. So a couple of things here that we need to deliberate on. One, the state, as per our laws, has a right to compulsorily acquire land in public interest for public use. So it talks about public health, public morality defense, and it talks about there are 4 areas. And whenever we talk about development, it's incumbent upon the state to be able to acquire land that it would use to do the development. But also, that's one segment of the development. The other segment is the bit of the investors themselves. The people are coming in to invest, because then when government wants to do a development project, it's not always that the government has the money to do these projects. So it brings in the investors. So we are dealing with a 2-pronged approach to financing. The first approach is the investors themselves, where they are investing, and they have an obligation to ensure that wherever their investments are done, the people should accept to have these investments. The free aspect of it, where they shouldn't be intimidated. The bit of the people being informed about what the investment will be about, what the returns will be to the community, but also what it is that the communities can also offer. So the one bit is the investor and the obligations that come with the investor, because then we know there's the bit of government has a role to protect, and the investor has a role to respect the rights of the people wherever they're investing, but also the access to remedy. But you see, on the other side, it is also the government, which is doing the development itself. It needs to seek financing for the development that comes in. So then you notice that investors from wherever they're coming from, they are having money that is from trust funds, the money that is coming from also financial institutions that have an obligation to uphold human rights. So wherever they are coming from, wherever they are domiciled, wherever they are registered, we have to hold them to account whenever their operations in the country violate the rights of the people. That is one. But also then we go back to the side of the state. Uganda borrows so much money from international finance institutions, from the World Bank, African Development Bank, European Investment Bank, and also all these other IFIs. In fact, now they're even holding a financing common summit where they're talking about how they're putting money out there collectively as these financials. And then you realize that on one hand is an institution that is financing this project. Government is getting money from that institution. But also that same institution, the World Bank, has an obligation to ensure that wherever Uganda invests the money that they've lent out to it, Uganda has to make sure that the rights of the people are not violated. Because even the World Bank uses money from donor countries, from countries that put money into it. So if Armenia puts money in the World Bank has an obligation to see that the taxpayers' money in Armenia is not used in Uganda to violate the rights of the people. So at every level, there is responsibility that comes with upholding human rights. And so you notice that in the event that we have challenges with our government, ensuring that the rights of the people are not violated, we've heard of Wadelai, where people are shot at to get their land. And this is an African Development Bank finance project. We have cases where people are beaten. We have cases where people's labor is violated. There's a lot of casualization of labor. So you notice that all these financials have their safeguard policies that in the event that the national legal framework does not protect the people, or that there is gross impunity that we keep seeing, then people can always fall back to those financials, fall upon the safeguard policies of those financials, and from there, they can always, through complaints or through other means, be able to call upon the financials to come and intervene where their rights are violated and where the government is not really acting upon it. For example, with Wadelai, that Mr. MP Payoliel has talked about, Wadelai, the community has now gotten to a level of filing a complaint with the independent recourse mechanism of the Africa Development Bank, because internally they haven't been able to seek redress for the rights that have been violated. So at one point, we are seeing that even at a point when the element of free, without coercion, the element of information is not adhered to by government wherever it's investing, the people can always get to the safeguard policies, which are so keen on consultation, which are so keen on providing information. And if you go to the websites of all these international finance institutions, they provide so much of this information about all these projects, as opposed to countries like our own in Uganda, where so much of this information is termed as classified. Yeah, but if you go to these people, they provide the information, they give you the guarantee that you shouldn't be forced, they give you the guarantee that your consent should be sought. And in the event that that is not done, then they give you a recourse to justice through their independent recourse mechanisms or through their independent redress mechanisms. So basically, there is always room for a financier to be able to intervene where the government is violating the rights of the people through development, projects and investments. But also for the investors, they are shareholders. They're the people that are investing in those companies. For instance, we have Total Uganda. I'm picking on just a corporation. I'm not saying they are violating the rights of the people. In the event that it's violating the rights of the people, which I believe it's not doing, then you can always go to those that are holding shares within there, those that are financing Total, and that's where now we bring in the aspect of corporate accountability, where we are holding corporations to account. So I want to sum it up to give the people out there assurance that in the event that government is not heeding to the cries of the people, or in the event that government is complicit in the rights, the violations that are going on, there's always room for the financials of the corporations that are doing investments, of the international finance institutions that are supporting the development of the development projects to come up through their safeguard policies to uphold the rights of the people.
Thank you so much, John Mwebe, for ably speaking to the role of international financial institutions in ensuring that there is accountability. And to me, I want to speak to these international financial institutions. To what extent are you monitoring compliance of your safeguard policies? Because you give our government money, and these safeguard policies require that people's rights are not abused. So as the African Development Bank, as the World Bank, to what extent are you monitoring the compliance of your safeguard policies when it comes to implementation of development projects and also respecting people's rights? I'm now going to come to the membership in the audience. I'll be listening in from Greater Masaka, I'll be listening in from FIDA Uganda on the participation of the vulnerable in these consultation processes. What is the story like? I'll be listening in from Rice West Nile and the colleagues in the room. So somebody help me get the microphone to the participant from Greater Masaka, Mr. Kainga. What is the story like? I know the East African crude oil pipeline is cutting across from Zimbabwe all the way to Rengo, down to Chotera, Rakai, and then into our neighbor Tanzania. To what extent has the implementation of this project respected the principles of free, prior, and informed consent? Briefly.
Thank you so much. Kainga Modisto, the network coordinator and a human rights defender from Greater Masaka, working with the Community Transformation Foundation Network, COTFON. It's good that I've been following up the e-COP engagements in Greater Masaka for the last 3 years. And if we go to free prior informed consent, I have to say that a lot is desired to be addressed by all those concerned, the joint ventures, the cooperative actors, because we have been in a situation of, first of all, people in Greater Masaka, we are having over 2,000 households. So over 2,000 households, that is almost over 10,000 people, if you count how many people are going to be affected in that region. The compensation was delayed to now over 3 years. Already that is jeopardizing their right to economic opportunity. We had so many issues. COVID came, a lot of school dropouts came in. But when the process of rapid disclosure came in, there are incidences where, for example, perhaps some project affected persons are missing some items on the forms, and they are not given time to even understand the valuations, the valuation forms. There is no breakdown of items. For example, if my farm, I have 200 coffee plants, each coffee costs this. So they just blow to block a figure. So people really found this not to the reality, and had to raise this concern. But up to now, the challenge is that those that are raising the challenge that, yes, you are forcing us to sign before we agree with the information on these forms, it's very unfortunate that even now some pups have started to be arrested, and charges have started being put on these people, unknown charges. Just to me, it's a form of intimidation to them, because if a pup feels that he's not contented with what is written, it's his right not to sign. And also, you as a corporation, the subcontractor, for example, have a new plan, you need to give this person time. But you cannot, people were invited in the evening, please come in the morning and get to understand your valuations. Why do you want to give somebody just 30 minutes to sign for that? So to me, I think that is denying somebody, because if you want to really have the real consent, why don't you give me the forms and I spend that form for a week? Then I come back, and when I have even interacted with my people at family level. Two, there was a lack of legal representation. Imagine these are people who don't know English. So, and there was a limitation. Come with your husband or a spouse. And the majority of them, both of them were never educated. So there was no chance for a papa to say, let me get somebody who can interpret for me. So if a corporation is represented to get interpretation, where is the fairness of the PAP to be represented so that he is able to understand that I am signing the right information? And right now they are saying, whatever they signed, there was in English, they don't even know what they signed, but they already sign. So these are issues that on the ground.
Thank you so much,
that
Mr.
really
Kainga.
have to be addressed to ensure that there is fairness and there is justice to the vulnerable people from Greater Masaka. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing the experience from Greater Masaka when it comes to the East African Crude Oil Pipeline implementation. And surely the Petroleum Authority of Uganda should be watching this, the East African Crude Oil Pipeline project and their consultant new plan. It's very important to obtain free, prior and informed consent from the communities. All of us want the oil to be explored. We want it to be sold out there for revenue to come and improve our healthcare, our education in the country. But because people are losing their land, it's important that you give them all this information and obtain their consent freely, other than using coercion. Yes, Elizabeth, what's the story for the vulnerable women in the cycle of development implementation from your experience from FIDA Uganda?
Thank you very much. This is Elizabeth Kemij from FIDA Uganda. I would like to, one, appreciate the panelists for sort of putting this conversation in context. with what we are doing with when we speak about free, prior, and informed consent. Our concern from FIDA as an organization that focuses on women and children as our target beneficiaries has been mostly questions. When you see projects that are coming up, we usually ask what's happening to the women, what's happening to the children. When you speak about free, prior, and informed consent, the previous speaker spoke about the fact that they were given forms and asked to come with their spouses. We know that in many areas in this country, many men are not only attached or married or unified with one woman, right? So we are dealing with polygamous relationships or unions in the different communities where we come from. And the question that I would ask most of these development partners that come to me, or maybe investors or these business cooperatives that are doing work in these communities, is have they done enough research, enough surveys to find out if this party, who is this person that is getting this information that they are sharing? Who are their partners, right? I like the idea that he shares about the fact that they asked each of them to come with their spouse. But because of those dynamics at family level, it is important that they interest themselves with what is happening in that area. So if it's an area that is known to have polygamous relationships or polygamous unions, then they should be interested in that, however, petty it may seem at that bigger economic level. Two, we are also concerned about who's getting compensation. We know that not all development projects have gone south. Many of them have had good processes where people are compensated for their land or for their crops or for their gardens, etc. and etc. Our concern is who's getting that compensation. Again, we know that the general idea is that men are the breadwinners of their families, but we know that that has changed over time in many communities, in urban areas, in peri-urban areas, and also in the rural areas. So who is getting this compensation? When we did consultations in Kabong and Napak, I remember women saying that they came and asked us, they did come and actually consult us in a language that we all understood. We sat around in groups, they asked us to register our names. But when it came to time for compensation, it was mostly our husbands, our sons that were at the forefront because of those social dynamics that have always, increased the inequalities in communities. So what development cooperatives or corporations should interest themselves in is that those dynamics at family, at community level before they get into invest in these areas. Those are some of the two things I could share right away.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for ably speaking to the plight of the vulnerable when it comes to development implementation across the country. I like that you've had engagements in Karamoja, in Kabong, and the women are sharing the realities. So I'll go to the participant from Rice, West Nile. I know that you have a city. Arua is a city. And what that means is very many business enterprises are coming your way. Infrastructure developments, they are probably widening the roads, constructing stadiums. I don't know if Onduparaka still has a home, but you'll tell us how all these development projects are interacting with the people in Arua City. What's happening to that Central Forest Reserve that I saw when I last visited? Is it still there, or an investor has taken it?
Thank you so much. My name is Ramji Krishna, and I work with the Rural Initiative for Community Empowerment, West Nile, that is Rice West Nile, and we are based in Arua. Thank you so much for raising these issues, and it's no doubt that FPIC is emerging as one of the best practices for safeguarding community rights where large-scale development projects are taking place. And I'd like us to look at it in three critical questions of how FPIC can be implemented and who is supposed to implement FPIC. Because like we have seen over time where large development projects are taking place, even the current oil and gas activities taking place, we are trying to now move backwards. But we started in a way that does not give time for consultation and also to seek consent of communities. What has been happening and is still happening is that still there's denial of participation of affected communities. Let's see, for example, we are here talking about land in acres, hectares, but there are individuals fencing off community land in kilometers. One person trying to own kilometers of land, claiming that the land is his or hers. And in such a process, through this kind of fraudulent land acquisition, they eliminate the real communities that own this piece of land from the processes of FPIC. And in the long run, when the time comes for consultation, there's no community to consult because the communities have already been evicted from their land by just one single person owning land in kilometers. Another key aspect is,
in summary, I want to get the voice from Teso and Karamoja.
okay,
Okay.
our local communities being bought by unfulfilled promises, because people's consent are being bought by wishful thinking. They just come and make promises and they fail to fulfill these promises. And this shows that our communities still do not understand fully the principles of FPIC, which gives us higher chances that we should go deep down there and sensitize the communities about their rights and how FPIC works so that they can be able to stand for themselves and advocate for their rights. Thank you.
The issue of people from West Nile. As you're taking the microphone to the participant from Soroti, I want to emphasize that as the Uganda Consortium on Corporate Accountability, we call upon communities, project implementers, to move from corporate social responsibility because of the inadequacy that comes with its voluntariness. We need community development agreements where the community sits together with the developer and agree on exactly the kind of development they want, put it down on paper, and sign, such that there is accountability at the end of the day. This business of calling media houses and painting a zebra crossing and saying, oh, we gave this community a zebra crossing, children are not having a safe space to cross the road. No, that's not what Ugandans need. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm Isaac Gibulo from Kumi, representing TEQUIP. First of all, the main gap we have is the information gap. There's no follow-up on projects that they bring up, and they keep doing the new things and forgetting the old things. Then they don't guide the people. They start up something, they don't guide the people. We had the Myoga. Up to now, we don't know what happened. Everything just went silent. There's late delivery. When they promise you something, they deliver. Let me say, if they promise you seeds, they bring the seeds after the rains. So they become useless. There is no prioritizing of things. Right now in Tisai Island, there is wastage of resources, unfulfilled promises. The communities don't get opportunities. They instead bring other people from outside to do what they promised you that they are going to give you. They are using the youth politically and not economically. When you look at their promises, they just wait for after the season of what they promised, they disappear. Right now in Tisai Island, they haven't given us a priority on the education, health, water, and the roads. Even the compensation. The poor have remained poor, the rich are the ones who are benefiting. So they said the works would start this year, but we're already in November.
Thank you so much for sharing the experience from Teso. I'll now come to Everest briefly in a minute, then we'll go to Allen and Dalton. Everest comes from Karamoja Development Forum, from the Karamoja region where we have lots of minerals. Briefly.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well. Loitakore Everest from KDF, that's Karamoja. And as of course you know, a lot of land in Karamoja is under mineral mining concessions. And as my colleagues have alluded earlier, there is a lot of human rights abuse, as we can note. But of course, specifically on free, prior and informed consent, we're a community that's much more illiterate. There is a lot of illiteracy in the region. And of course, this comes with a cost, to the extent that even the literates within the region themselves have joined mining companies in taking advantage of locals. They have signed land and given out to multinationals. There is even a scenario whereby a mining company got a group of elders in a village, bought for them a local bulls, killed for them a bull, and that was enough. The land was gone. can imagine situations such as those. And people are
So
not
much,
informed.
Everest, for sharing such a harsh reality. You can imagine getting the elders where land is customarily owned, buying for them local brew, and roasting for them a bull, and then you obtain consent at the detriment of the whole clan because they hold this land in trust of the clan. We shall have Alan from Bank Information Center first.
Thank you, UCCA, for organizing such an opportunity for us to bring forward some of the issues that affect citizens in Uganda. I want first of all note that when we talk about land matters, we are talking about matters that affect humanity in totality. When land matters, when we have land violations, it means we have violated the right to food, and when we have violated the right to food, we have violated the right to life. And when it comes to development, we are talking about development projects where we are talking about issues that affect persons affected by these very projects. I want to note that most of the projects that are implemented in this country as a prerequisite, they are supposed to prepare what we call the resettlement action plan. This action plan is supposed to make several inputs, and they are supposed to be inclusive of the community. They are supposed to assess the land that they are going to use. They are going to give value to the land that they are going to use. They are also supposed to compensate the people that are affected by these projects. What is happening in all this where we are talking about free prior informed consent is, in Uganda we start by consenting before giving the information. And what is it that our people are consenting to? I was in Cavalry recently where we have a project that is funded by African Development Bank, and this is a roads project. At the community level, people have already consented. They have written. They are waiting for money to be wired to their accounts. At the district level, where we are talking of stakeholder engagement, the cows are waiting for assessment lists that are indicating what was assessed and who is benefiting from what. Now, the question is here. What is UNRWA doing in regard to providing information? People just signed because they are promised money. But even the money they were promised, the language that was used was very intimidative. They were told, if you don't sign, then we shall engage with the lawyers. And when we talk of lawyers, it means the free or the freedom of one is already lost. So I call upon the implementers, the financiers of the projects that we are proud of to come out and respect the free prior informed consent.
Thank you so much, Alan, for sharing an experience from Cavalry. We shall have Dalton in half a minute and come to Gloria before we go to our panelists to wrap it up. Time is fast spent.
Thank you so much, moderator Joseph. Mine is a question. When you were moderating, you referred to, when people are undertaking projects, they should ensure that there is corporate accountability instead of corporate social responsibilities, corporate social responsibility. And we have often had situations where we tell people to have what we call community development agreements instead of, the corporate social responsibility that we have always known. Maybe for John, when you're making your conclusive remarks or any other remarks, to clarify for whoever could be out there or any viewer that is seeing this show, to understand what are community development agreements and why are they important compared to corporate social responsibility.
Thank you so much, Dalton. John will definitely speak to that. Kindly pass the microphone to Gloria from Fraud Rights Alliance. She'll be the last participant in the plenary, and then I'll go back to the panelists.
Thank you so much. I think when we talk of the principle of free, prior, and informed consent, it also gives the government an obligation to respect, to protect and promote the rights of the people. And in this we mean when the project is taking place, the government has a role to watch throughout so that the rights of the people are promoted. And at the same time, it means that when the community do not consent to any project, they are supposed to be given a right to access justice. Unfortunately, in Uganda, we have seen the victims of these projects being denied justice by different ways. They are being intimidated, they have been arrested, they have been tortured, they have been raped. So many things have happened. So like when we take an example of the Kawere coffee case that has stayed for 20 years, we have victims that have never gotten justice up to date. They have never gotten their compensation, much as a few have already consented to some of this compensation. So it's an obligation of the government to ensure that when we are promoting this principle during development projects in Uganda, the citizens of Uganda takes priority and their rights have to be upheld as these development projects are going on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gloria, for ably pointing out the need for the government to come in and protect the rights of the people. In as much as we want these development projects, yes, we have an aspiration as a country to get to a middle income status. But the development is for us. It's not for anyone out there. So if you subject people to harassment for over 20 years, you can imagine some families could have lost their breadwinners in the process. So we need to have a functional justice system to ensure that in case of an abuse or violation of human rights in implementation of development projects, there is recourse for the families. Kindly bring back the microphone to my panelists. I'll start with Mr. John Mwebe. The question on the floor is, what's the distinction between corporate social responsibility and having a community development agreement? And then we'll go to Jennifer, and Mr. Nenchan will help us wrap up.
Thank you for that. You see, over time in the investment space, there's been an idea we've been toying with, that everyone has been toying with, the idea of the social license to operate. And the social license to operate connotes the ability of the people that are going to be affected negative and positive, by the investment, to have a say, to have an input in what it is that they want to see happen with the investment. Because then an investment and development thereof that comes with it is meant to make the people better. It's not meant to make people worse. So as we toy with the idea of the social license to operate, the operationalization of this license to operate lies with the development of community development agreements. And basically the wish of the community and the aspirations of the community to see that this investment can make them better alongside the profit that the investment reaps to the owners. Yeah. So when we talk about the community development agreement, it's basically what the people want to see come out of the investment to benefit them alongside the investment benefiting the people. This is something that we're struggling with because as a government, it doesn't really promote so much of the community-led development planning. But you see, this is one part where the communities would be benefiting from these investments. But on the flip side is the corporate social responsibility. Now, at one point, I'm quite demanding, or I'm making suggestions of what I would want to see. And this can be documented through a community development agreement. But on the other side, what lies within these agreements is for these corporations to do corporate social responsibility, where they will always determine what they want to do for that community. It's voluntary. They determine what they want to do for the community, as opposed to what it is that we would request them to do for us through a community development agreement. And I want to add this. Oftentimes, you notice that the violations of rights of the people, either through the inability to have them consent to some of the operations or with limited information, the violations where a corporation goes ahead and the waste from the corporation pollutes the water source. At one point, the waste from a corporation is polluting the water source, but the corporation is setting up a school. So when you want to question the waste in the water source, they are talking about the number of kids that are going to school. So now we want to deal with the issue of corporate social responsibility, not to sanitize the wrongs, but to do its purpose of adding value to a community. But we see that interchange most of the time, and we have to deal with that. And lastly, you see, when I talk about government having the right to compulsorily acquire land for public use and in public interest, we are talking about the ability of government to use its coercive force. But you see, there is an understanding that that acquisition of land should be prior to taking possession. Compensation should be done prior to taking possession, and that has an element of FPIC. But we see that many times the reason the people's rights are violated is because the state comes, lately there's a phrase that's being used, it uses its full chest to come out and get the land without dealing with the bit of the prior, without dealing with the bit of informing the people. Yet in actual sense, the safeguards, the laws are talking about them having the consent of the people. So it's always one thing that we have to deal with, to see that the people may not be intimidated, they can give their consent prior to taking possession. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John, for ably explaining the issue. Yes, Jennifer, what is your parting shot? What should the local governments do? Sometimes they are skipped from this whole process. From Kampala straight to the land, the local governments have zero idea what's happening. What's your message to them and to the implement?
Actually, we shall all accept that information flow, more especially in the extractive sector, it's top to grassroots and leaving out the middle segments within the government. And when you talk to the local governments, they really don't know what is happening, because these people come with people from the ministries, go direct and meet the communities. So I would call upon the stakeholders, right from the ministry, the PAU, the UNOC, to always engage the local government, because these are the people who are based at the grassroots. These are the people who are always meeting with the communities, and these people are always freely interacting with these the local government officials, whom they understand very well and share the same language, and that in case there is anything, it is quick to reach them out rather than reaching out to the ministries and other authorities. So I would call upon the relevant ministries to streamline and in their processes of engagement at grassroots level, at local government level, to include all those key stakeholders who are based at the local government levels, such that people will be able, the PAPs, make special PAPs, because they believe in the people that they stay with. So they are able and quick to accept the developments that are coming in the region.
Much, Jennifer, for sending that call to the duty bearers, especially at the central government level, to desist from skipping local governments when it comes to the extractive sector. They are the leaders of the people at that level, and they deserve to know. They have to be involved in the process. It's very important across the country. Yes, Mr. Nenchan, what are your parting shots?
Yes, thank you, listener, and Joseph, thank you. I think one of the bigger challenges is around the grievance management. I think all these projects are supposed to be having a grievance mechanism in place, either on site one, but in most of the project we tend to monitor. You get at times they don't have those mechanisms, sometimes they have them, but it's not operationalized. So there's a call that the projects need to have those mechanisms in place, and actually it helps them to know what is the community concern. If there's somebody who have grievance, and they can manage and also address it there and then, and make sometime issues solve and resolve at that point. Because of not having those kind of things, you get number of grievances goes without also managing them, resolving them, at times goes out of hands. To get at times people tend to run to courts over small things that can be managed. So that is also one of the important mechanisms that I think the project implementers and also financiers, they need to ensure that it is always there at the project sites. Thank you, James. Joseph, man.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nenchan, for highlighting the need to have a functional project-level grievance redress mechanism. From the visits we've made to the field, right from the road construction. The grievance books for UNRWA are piled there. And I kept asking, so does UNRWA ever come back to read the complaints of the communities and address them? And the answer is no. The story is the same when it comes to the East African crude oil pipeline. People are there with their forms. I don't know what the ECO project is doing with their consultant new plan. They need to go on ground together with their regulator, Petroleum Authority of Uganda, and look at the functionality of the project level grievance mechanism. Because when they don't work, when those systems don't work, then we are going to create a breeding ground for conflict, which we don't want. We are going to get into a state, sorry about that, we are going to get into a state where investments in our country have to be militarized. For a business enterprise to operate in our country, then you need to make a phone call to the head of state, to the army, such that you're moving around with soldiers. But we have come to the realization that militarization of investments and development projects is not sustainable. You need to go down, speak to the people, explain to them, because these development projects are for us as Ugandans. Explain to them the good, explain to them the bad, explain to them the mitigation measures you've put in place. Yes, there will be negative impacts from implementing all the development projects, but tell people the measures you've listed to be able to curb the negative impacts that are going to come from those development projects. That way, you're going to participate in making collective decision making with local governments, with the communities, with the government, with members of parliament, with the soldiers themselves, because in as much as they are soldiers, they are also members of the community. One day, they'll go to their villages and establish probably an agricultural plantation that is commercial. So we call upon all duty bearers out there to ensure that we respect the principles of free, prior, and informed consent, because it's the surest way for our country to get to the middle income status with peace and in harmony. Thank you so much.
Are you ready for what's coming? We are getting bigger and stronger. We know what you need, and we're letting you know we've got you. Get ready to eat life with an even bigger spoon. It's convenient and accessible. It's different and exciting. It's the digital revolution. Nation Media Group Uganda. Media of Africa for Africa.
Crystal mineral water is a sanctuary of refreshment. It is drawn from nature's underground resource in its purest form. This high-tech production system ensures that the entire process of water treatment and bottling is untouched by human hand. To ensure that every bottle is up to Harris International class, the quality of each crystal bottle is stringently verified. From our stores, it is then dispatched to our retail partners, finally finding its way into the homes and hearts of millions of Ugandans.
Are you ready for what's coming? We are getting bigger and stronger. We know what you need, and we're letting you know we've got you. Get ready to eat life with an even bigger spoon. It's convenient and accessible. It's different and exciting. It's the digital revolution. Nation Media Group Uganda. Media of Africa for Africa.
On the next episode is brought to you by
Crystal mineral water is a sanctuary of refreshment.
On the next
Oh no.